Okay, good evening. With a bit of a delay, but we're back. Welcome to the Westborough Advisory Finance Committee meeting of February 26, 2024. We're meeting in Great Hall in the Forbes Municipal Building tonight. This is our meeting number 22 of fiscal 2024. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body, as well as members of the public, may access this meeting in person or via virtual means. In-person attendance will be at our location here, and it is possible that all members of the public body may attend remotely, with in-person attendance consisting of members of the public. This meeting may be accessed remotely via the link in the posted agenda. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by in-person attendance or by accessing the meeting remotely as noted. Additionally, the meeting will be broadcast live in real time via Verizon Channel 28, Charter Channel 192, or via Westborough TV's online platforms at westboroughTV.org and youtube.com/WestboroughTV. This meeting will be recorded and live streamed by Westborough TV, and we thank them for their help. Tonight, we're very happy to have our guest, Chris Pant, the DPW Director, and I guess we get a little more information that the members wanted on some of the articles. We did go through these to a large extent at the summit, but I think there was interest in some other information. So I guess if anybody has specific questions as we go, make sure I get my attention. But I was going to start on what I think the first DPW article, which is partially DPW, which is 11E, which is the three vehicles. Since we last met with you or got information from you, we actually reached out to the building department and the health department and got information on their old clunkers. And so it really is just knowing, I guess from you now, which one of the ones from that list of vehicles you sent is the car that the DPW would be replacing for this article, if you know. Yeah. Well, you provided us a nice list of actually all the vehicles. So is it one in particular so that we know, for instance, it's a 2014 something or another or whatever? I think there was general interest in knowing before which vehicles. And at first, when we got your list, we thought that was all the cars, but as you pointed out, that is just the cars for the DPW that's in there, or the vehicles. So.
Sorry, we are not able to hear it, Chris.
Can you maybe move that mic just a little closer?
Or maybe the other one.
The mic doesn't look like it's on.
Oh, these ones turn off? How about the other one? That looks dead.
That's not plugged in. I don't know about the other one. That one looks like it should be.
Yeah, it's not even plugged in.
Even mine, I don't care. Ah. Yeah, that worked.
That's live, baby.
How about now?
We need some new speakers.
Let's see yeah, that works. Excellent, thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Are you sleeping?
Anybody who was sleeping is now awake.
So the vehicle we're replacing in the DPW is in our engineering division. It's our inspector's vehicle. It's a SUV, former fire department vehicle that was handed down. I think it's a 2015, but it's not in use because we can't drive it. It's not mission capable anymore, so that's the vehicle we're replacing. And I guess I will add on, I know it sounds like you got some information about the other two vehicles, but I mentioned at the summit that, you know, it's our intent as a town and under the DPW to basically consolidate the management of the fleet. And there was a question originally about why we're replacing 3 vehicles, and it was based on the number 6 that I gave you, but we know we have more than that. We have 16, and so just I think it's just good to keep in mind that 16, although we get much more than 5 years out of these vehicles, and the police department also uses a 5-year life cycle, that would be 3 years or 3 vehicles per year to maintain a life cycle of 5 years. So, there is some methodology to the replacement plan, and that aligns with everything we've said in terms of sticking to a life cycle for our vehicles.
Well, I think really that was initially the plan, is we were questioning why 3 of 6 were all being replaced, and the 16.
16
With
makes
that-
much more sense.
Yeah.
And although it seems like these cars are being replaced in way longer than 5 years.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Funny you should say
more
that.
like
I
10
actually
or
built a
12 or-
spreadsheet and broke it down, and on average, they are far over the useful life
Yeah,
on all of their vehicles by replacement. I mean, that is consistent across the board in any category of vehicles that they're replacing. There are not any, with the exception potentially of some of the 1-ton trucks, which from my understanding get pretty heavy use, and rough use, right? The snow plowing, is my understanding, is different. Those are the only ones that are really running close to the useful life. Even the rest are all.
Okay, I want to stick to the cars for now, so I don't get rabbit-holed. Is there any other information anybody on this board needs for this specific article?
I have a question for Jane, who has the spreadsheet. Do you know where the 16, did you come up with 16 vehicles somehow?
No, so I don't have the 16, so I'm just looking at the DPW ones, which
Okay.
includes the 6 admin that are DPW and the rest of their vehicles. So I just took the spreadsheet that I assume Chris sent that had the actual vehicles listed with their,
Are you looking to
Years.
see where they are, or?
I was curious, but
I can tell you, we can also give you the information, but I can tell you if you're interested right now. I can kind of read it to you.
Sure. And just while you're doing that, the only other question I have, is it still a policy or practice to use hired police or fire department vehicles for other town?
I don't know that we've said definitively that we don't do that. It's generally not the recommendation, and that's primarily based on the green communities requirements we have, which mean you can't, if you're going to do a hand-me-down, you have to be going up in your efficiency of your vehicle. So if we have an old vehicle and replace it with an old vehicle, we're not, and we're not getting better gas mileage essentially, then we're not supposed to do that based on the green communities policy. But now that the police department has hybrids, I don't think they're at any point where they're getting ready to replace any of the hybrids, but potentially, I think that's out there as a possibility, but there's, it's really the police that's the option for a hand-me-down or passing off, and there's reconfiguration of the vehicle that has to happen that costs money, and we don't have the parts on hand to do that, so they're not outfitted inside the vehicles the same way, like for passengers, the way we would use them. So it's a long answer, but I don't think it's I mean, we wouldn't write it off because there might be a situation where it makes total sense to do that, but that's not a standard that we're adhering to in terms of an automatic, pass off. So assessor's office has 1, Board of Health has 2, building department has 3. Others, I think you're familiar with the 3 vans with the senior center. The conservation department has 1. The recreation department has a van. We have our 6, but we also have 2 that are associated with buildings and grounds. And I think that was all of them I just listed, so.
Anybody else have any other questions to do this question?
Want to do this now?
Yeah. We don't have any questions now. Let's
Sure.
go.
Yep. McMahon, I make a motion To recommend the town vote to transfer $112,500 from free cash and $12,500 from sewer retained earnings and $12,500 from water retained earnings and raise and appropriate
Oh, there's one more, 12,500 from Stormwater Enterprise.
retained
my
earnings,
notes.
water retained earnings. I'm sorry. Yep, they're just out of order. 12,500 from stormwater utilities and 12,500,
It's basically 12,500 each from
each
sewer,
from
water,
sewer,
and
water.
stormwater.
Yep. For the purpose of replacing 3 admin vehicles.
Bradley, second.
Any further discussion?
So just an observation that where we talk about the fact that the 5 years is optimal for replacement, but we tend to run these things much longer. I think most of these vehicles replacing are closer into the 8, 9, 10-year range. And the demand on the vehicles is obviously very different from the police profile. So I want in our minds to separate those two, but it means that there isn't necessarily 3 that we have to replace every year. I mean, if you move the replacement up to 7 years instead of 5, then you're down to 2 vehicles most years and 3 sometimes. So I realize, I think the compelling case has been made about, obviously, a vehicle that doesn't drive is not just being replaced, we're actually adding new functionality. There's no way you can get around that. And the other 2, if we're to believe the folks who've presented to us, and we should because they're good, competent, capable people, they're real beaters. But I don't want us to assume, as a matter of automatic discourse, that 3 is the right metronome for this. And I think, especially as we start talking about replacing a lot of these folks and under the control of the DPW, which is doing a great job of pulling this all together, I don't want to make that an assumption or an automatic assumption going forward.
I just have one other, and
Sure.
so the next one is the senior center van, which we're already still replacing, so we're actually replacing 4 out of the 16.
Well, those, the 3 would be added to the 16. So I didn't count the vans as admin vehicles.
Oh, okay, okay.
But can I make a comment on
Of course.
what was just said? So I acknowledge what you say. I mean, I agree with you. I'm not saying that we need to stick to 3 vehicles every year. I'm just saying we have to have some methodology to measure ourselves, and then based on the conditions at the time, we decide if it makes sense to stick with that plan, or hey, these vehicles are all in good shape, we can keep them for another year, we don't need to change them out, kind of thing. So which is why, if you look at the vehicle plan that's in the budget, it's 5 years out, but I can't guarantee you that's what we're sticking to even next year, because something might change between now and then. It would drive a different approach. But we've got a method for how we came up with it, and we'll do our best to try and make the most sense for everybody. So
Just a quick question since you brought it up. So looking at the 5-year plan, I don't see any more administrative vehicles for the next 4 years.
That
Or is that,
might be DPW only, right? Or is that the whole capital plan?
yeah, I can address that. So I'm not saying there won't be administrative vehicles in the next 5 years, but what I will say is that, which I've said, is that we're basically relooking our admin vehicle plan, and I can't say the numbers yet, but I think there's potential that we're going to reduce that number from 16 to a lower number. And so we need to figure that out, and then we can come back with a proposal for, these vehicles are kind of assigned to positions, and these vehicles are just a motor pool, basically. And as you need a vehicle, you come sign it out, and the next day somebody else uses it. And so we're getting multiple uses from a single vehicle. So to me, that's the option we want to lean towards, and that's our intent for this coming year, is to figure that out, and then ideally next year we can come back. Even if we're not asking for a vehicle, we can at least say what our plan is for the future.
And I have to say, DPW is phenomenal for organizing this. I remember you 3 or 4 years ago bringing the chart of the larger vehicles and how you started making much more methodological. So I'm behind that, but I'd also say that what we didn't have last year is a $1,000 increase, which is eye-popping and has to have us asking much tougher questions, you know, if we're going to be responsible stewards of the tax burden. So the plan is great. I think, who's it said, everybody has a great plan until you're punched in the face. This is a punch in the face, and I think it's time to start rethinking some of the things. I will let people vote their conscience in that regard. So keep with the planning. I think you do a phenomenal job, but it's just, this is our punch in the face.
Well, but I applaud the concept of trying to reduce the vehicle pool because there'll be less maintenance and having 12 working cars or something versus 16 where 8 of them don't work, it very well would seem like a better idea. But that point of view. Okay, let's move to a vote unless there's further comment. We'll check in with our people who are remote, Beth and Prashant, if you unmute, and we can vote, or you can comment.
No, so I just had one comment there. In the vehicles, I assume that what Chris is referring to, the vehicles which are highlighted as admin, I see they start from 2008 in the years provided, and they have 2014, 15, and 16. So I assume the ones we are replacing are the ones which are 14, 15, 16. Would that be correct?
No. I think you missed something, that one vehicle is for the Department of Health, one vehicle is for the Building Department, and those are not on Chris's list. And we got
Okay.
information on those at other meetings or previous meetings. One Beth found out, and then I reported one last meeting.
Okay, so the Excel doesn't have that. Okay, got it, got it.
So you can vote if you'd like. Prashant?
Okay. Yep. So Ahuja, yes.
Blumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes?
Brandt, yes.
Clap, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Crawford, yes.
Okay, so we actually have everybody here tonight. That's 900 with everybody present. Okay, on to the next one, which is Article 11F, one-ton vehicles replacement, or 2 of them. It's $190,000 from free cash. Are there any questions for Chris, that particular vehicle?
I guess my question, and I'm sure Andrew knows it more being on the capital planning, but just trying to get a better understanding of what the long-term plan is and how many vehicles, how do we evaluate how many vehicles we need for some of those other departments? And the second part of it, if I look at the capital plan for vehicle, or capital plans for DPW this year, it's $1,360,000, the next year it's $550,000, the next year it's $475,000. And I agree with what Andrew said earlier. I think this is not the year to be adding anything more than we can afford to. And I guess my question would be, if you had to prioritize your request, how would you prioritize them?
So the reason it's $1.3 million primarily is because of that $627,000 vehicle, the sewer jet, and that would be the number one vehicle we would require. To the point about the funding, there's a few things to say, I guess. One is that this is coming from either retained earnings or free cash. So even if we didn't pay for any of these vehicles, that's not going to affect the tax rate. The tax rate's still going to be what it is because this is all free cash.
Can I just interrupt for
Yeah.
one? Sorry. So I mean, this is my big, and I don't know if we disagree or agree as a board, but if we return free cash to the taxpayers, that will lower their tax rate. And that's why I would like to see some of these capital projects deferred. So instead of $450,000 returning to the taxpayers, it's $1 million. I think the going up $1,000 per year for each taxpayer is egregious, and I think we need to find another solution. So I understand what you're saying, but nothing's free, and, you know, even the reserves aren't free, so.
Yeah, so I guess the second point I was going to make is that a significant portion of that $1.3 million, so at least that $627,000 is coming from enterprise funds, not the free cash. So it's being funded by the 3 utilities. So so that puts that 1.3, basically puts it in half to now to 600. And even some of that is not all. So really, the 6-wheel dump truck at $299, and then a portion of the 1-ton is coming out of free cash. So the rest is coming out of the enterprise funds.
Just one question. How does the Stormwater Enterprise Fund, how will that allow, if we haven't collected any money for the stormwater, how will that allow you to use it?
That's why it's listed as a raise and appropriate versus from retained earnings, because it's paid for out of the money we're generating for the current year, or, you know, that current year income, revenue.
Thank you.
Because it's fiscal 2025 where we will be collecting, is that correct? Yeah. Okay. And, okay. Any other questions, Chris?
Yeah, so thinking about the idea that a lot of the budgeting, as Christie has defined it, is predicated on the notion of level service delivery. And DPW is a very big group with a lot of different pieces working inside of it. What does not level service delivery mean to you in terms of where are there layers, or are there layers that could be pulled aside in terms of service? Like obviously is fire, for example, we could have fewer fire people, or for police, we could have fewer police people. But what does it mean for DPW if we're not level service or level funding services? How does that onion get peeled back? Is there a strategy? Will there be?
Well, there isn't right now because no one said we're not level funded.
Right.
But if you're asking me where we would maybe make that adjustment to provide a lower level of service, then I mean, kind of off the spot here, because I wasn't aware that was going to be necessarily something we wanted to get into, but happy to. It would be services that aren't critical to the town. So, like, you know, all the grass mowing and maintaining of fields, those are things that are nice to be done, but aren't essential. I mean, we have to, if you want to drive down the road, we have to fill potholes, and we have to keep the water running, the sewer, and the drain. So it would be services that we provide that are that the town clearly values, but aren't essential to kind of the basic services of life, right? So,
Sure.
So our parks would probably be the first place we'd go to start peeling back. And I guess our methodology would, I won't give you a specific statement, but I will give you a methodology, and that would be that water's going to be number 1, sewer's going to be number 2, and then I would suspect roads, which is tied to stormwater, is number 3, and then everything else is kind of on the table for being adjusted.
And if I may follow on that, I guess one of the things I was looking to hear, especially as it's relevant to this capital conversation that we're having right now, is in those things you're peeling back, again, for example, from a layperson's perspective, what if we had one fewer one fewer plow? Well, that would also mean one fewer dump truck. It would mean fewer people who are manning it. But everything that you talked about there in terms of what you were peeling back all seemed like people, and it doesn't seem like the equipment would really be impacted. Is that fair?
Actually, I wasn't referring to people. I was referring to tasks.
Services.
Services, yeah.
Yeah, well, people are doing the services.
And we're already, so I mentioned the admin vehicles, and I've mentioned before, I mentioned at the summit that we're looking at, regardless of the town's, tax situation right now, regardless of that, we're looking at ways to reduce our fleet because there's just other benefits to that. So, our 6-wheel and 10-wheel dump trucks, we have 12 of them. And our intent is to probably be down to 11 next year and potentially 10 the following year. But that's based on us getting the equipment that we have on order that's been on order for 2 years. So we have to get that equipment in first, and then we can basically replace equipment. So the equipment we're buying, if we remember, we talked about swap loaders and a truck that can do lots of things. So we get that truck in and it does multiple things for us. We can get rid of a truck that only does one thing. But we can't get rid of that one truck until we get the truck that comes in. So we have a plan to make some adjustments to our fleet specifically already, and we'll see benefits of that in a variety of ways. But so that speaks to vehicles. Yeah. I don't know that from a capital perspective, because vehicles are an important part of capital, but that's not the most important part of capital. I mean, there's plenty of other big capital projects that we're doing related to our infrastructure that, we can punt those too, but it's all about risk and how much risk do we want to take in terms of pushing things down the road. And so, I guess I'm kind of just rambling here, but I'm confident we have a plan moving forward to reduce our fleet size, since that's specifically what you mentioned, and the town will obviously see benefits of that. And we would do that even if you didn't ask us to. Like, there's other reasons to do that. So,
And to your point, the water supply improvements at $2.5 million, an example of something that's a larger number than the vehicles.
yes.
Yeah.
I think there's value in being able to communicate what you just did, because this isn't capital for capital's sake. This is capital now with an eye towards how we are working to actually reduce our capital footprint. I don't see that in any of the articles. I haven't seen that framed. I don't even remember that conversation from the capital planning, although it may have come up. It was a while ago. So I think there's value in communicating that, because again, I just don't see your work as capital for capital's sake. It's capital for a shrinking sake. It's building to shrink, which I think is compelling. Like, that's where we want to be headed. Even we may be being punched in the face this year, but we have to be looking years ahead. So I think there's value in that. So thank you.
Thanks very much. Any other questions?
I guess,
Prashant?
yeah. Yeah, thanks, Walter. So I think just one other point, just to build off on Andrew's point, I would have is there any sort of matrix that can be produced, or I don't know if it's possible or not, that, currently we have these many potholes that we have fixed, and if, let's say, we don't have that if we want to keep a level service or we reduce it, then fixing those potholes may take 1.5 days versus 1 day, that response time that we give. Or let's say the snow cleaning, if we don't have, this is how the delay, this much is the delay, or that we anticipate, as an example. Some sort of matrix, like, for example, I'll come to more on the staffing aspects of that, right, which may be coming later. That, let's say, if we don't staff one person, and in that manner, vehicle as well. What would be the impact in terms of service, in terms of how many requests we get now, or what is our turnaround time now versus what it possibly could look like? It may not be as accurate, but just a rough estimate on what it would look like in terms of level service or reducing the fleet by one vehicle if we don't do that.
I don't have anything to tell you right now, but I guess what I can tell you is some of the staffing requirements or requests we've made over the last 2 years were driven by a study that said we're already short. That's I think what you've heard from probably all the town staff is it's not like we're we're level right now. Here's our requirement, here's our staffing. Here's our requirement, here's our staffing. And so we cut our staffing, we're just going even further below our, like, we're just making the gap bigger. So, I know that's where we are with the public works, specifically with the positions we've requested, not across the board, not, like, things aren't, completely going off the rails. I'm just saying that we have a gap already, and so any sort of additional reduction is just making the gap bigger. I don't know, that's my answer.
Walter, I have a quick question. I've heard this staffing study referred to a number of times. Is that published anywhere?
Yes,
There have been multiple,
Is it
though,
on the
to be fair.
website somewhere?
yes.
Where is it public? Any idea?
I think it's under the town manager reports. It's
So there-
2020.
There was a sort of, I think, I don't know if the police and fire were
there
together,
was
but
a
there was
police and
sort of an
fire-
emergency one, and then there was a
So the
rest of the crew.
The police and fire, that's been discussion about adding police and fire over the last several years, that was done, I don't know how much,
Earlier.
earlier than the town one, and then the rest of the town did one in 2020. And so, there's, the police and fire are kind of on a path, and then there's a path for the town, kind of that's a step behind, I guess you could say, just based on the timing.
So, and I may be wrong about this, but at one point when I first joined, I went through and read the meeting minutes for back a couple of years, if you can believe it. It was very entertaining. But I thought at one point the AFC did not support that staffing study or didn't agree with it, or is that, anybody have any
The only people that would know would be Andrew and
My
Beth.
recollection.
I don't remember being against it. I think it was a timing thing. I think staffing studies always request more staffing, to be clear. Like, I've never seen 6 years staffing study that says, hey, we can start dealing people back. But I think that for all of the ones that in general, the way the town has approached them has been, and I think the AFC has generally supported, has been prorating the timing of the rolling folks on over a longer period of time.
Yeah, the other issue with the staffing study, I believe, was the cost of the study itself. I don't think the AFC had any issues with doing the staffing. Well, what Andrew said about when you do a staffing study, you usually get told you need more staff. So some people had an issue with hearing the news, not that they doubted we needed more staff. So there wasn't any contention with the studies not being good quality. I mean, we accepted the results.
Okay, thank you.
Just one last question, I hope. Has there ever been a conversation with the rec department about the true cost accounting for some of the services like the fields? Because as I hear you talking about the fields being one of the first things to go, the fields, while they are usable by the town, a lot of the current maintenance, or for some of the fields, I should say, is for stuff that happens in rec. So is there any money that passes as a cost accounting from rec to DPW for services rendered for what will be the services or the facilities they use?
Well, just so I don't get hammered tomorrow when I go to work. I'm not saying the town would agree with my approach. I'm saying that would be my recommendation.
No, fair enough.
And so the rec department obviously would have a voice in that, and,
Yep.
and, Jen has an interest in those fields and everything else working the way she needs them. So I just want to be clear about that. So we have a budget to maintain the fields. She has a budget, or the rec department has a budget to run the programs, and there is a little, I can't tell you a number, but I can tell you there's a little bit of overlap where if, there's just potentially, in some cases, there's some shared costs or cost sharing between departments to accomplish a task, but I mean, we're not talking things that are hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking, $100, $1,000 kind of small things where somebody covers that and we cover something else kind of thing. So, it's not, yeah, it's,
So there's no true cost accounting is what I'm hearing. It does sound like there's a little horse trading on the sides, but
well, I mean, you said there's no accounting. There is accounting, but
True
it,
cost accounting, which would be like when we put on a soccer clinic, for example, there's a cost of goals, there's a cost of referees, there's the
Right.
cost of the involvement.
Right.
There's also a cost to to cut the fields and
Right.
maintain the facilities.
Right.
That cost doesn't seem like it's being borne by the program. Could be, in true cost accounting, it'd be how much is that program? But it sounds like that's a cost that ends up in your line.
Correct.
Separate from, and that's, I guess that's what I was getting at. I
Yes.
think there's
Yes.
an opportunity to look at that from our point of view. That's why I
Yes.
asked the question. So thank you.
yeah.
Okay, motion?
11F. McMahon, I make a motion to recommend the town vote to transfer $190,000 from free cash for the purpose of purchasing and equipping 2 one-ton vehicles.
There's a second?
Blumberg, second.
Okay, very good. Any further discussion? Not, Prashant, you can start us off.
Ahuja, yes.
Blumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Brandt, yes.
Clap, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Shafford, no.
So that is 8-1-0, 9 present. Okay. Any particular reason you want me to note?
I would rather see the free cash spent elsewhere.
So our next one up is very similar but bigger, or maybe smaller. I don't know. Six-wheel dump truck, but one of them.
Are we ready for a motion on this one?
Well, I was just wondering if there are any specific questions to the six-wheel truck that was not covered by the last questions. Not, then yes, and then people can ask.
Right. McMahon, I move that we recommend the town vote to transfer $299,000 from free cash for the purpose of replacing and equipping a 6-wheel dump truck.
Bradley, second.
Okay, any further discussion? Questions or comments? Okay, Prashant,
Ahuja, yes.
Blumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Brandt, yes.
Clap, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Shafford, no.
That is 8-1-0. 9 present, sorry. Next up is the jetpack. Were there any specific questions on the jetpack, which comes from sewer, water, and stormwater?
Do you know what the stormwater enterprise, what the total what will the total that it will receive next year?
It's about 1.7 million.
Other questions? A motion.
McMahon, I move to recommend the town vote to transfer $209,000 from sewer retained earnings, $209,000 from water retained earnings, and to raise and appropriate $209,000 from stormwater utility enterprise for the purpose of purchasing and equipping a jet vac truck.
Second?
Clap, second.
I had one question, Chris, about how long does this kind of truck take to get, or do we know? Is this a
I think it'll be
couple of years like the other stuff, or?
15, 18 months probably.
Very good. Any other questions, comments? All right, let's vote.
Ahuja, yes.
Blumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Brandt, yes.
Clap, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Shafford, yes.
Yes, so that is a 9-0-0. Okay. I think the next ones get more complicated than vehicles. we also covered these, but the first one up is called Water Management Improvements. It's $275,000. It's 11I in your warrant, and my notes say it included water gates, valves, and meters. And I assume this is sort of we talked about in a couple of years ago, where instead of coming and asking specifically for a pump or this or that, that there'd be a certain amount on the warrant basically to replace those sort of things.
Yes.
If that's accurate. Did anybody have specific questions on this article?
I just wanted to clarify, so this is general repairs, this isn't a specific project, or, right, it's not the section of road at Flanders, right? Like, it's just for as stuff is needed to be done throughout the year, is that correct?
They will be, so it's primarily for the valve replacements, and so there will be specific valves that are at a certain road location, and there might be a cluster.
But it's not identified yet, I guess, was sort of my question, right? Like, you don't have a list that you're already, the 275 covers this year's list, but it's rather 275, and then we'll figure out what our priorities are from there, is that?
No, we have, we know where the valves are that need to
okay.
be replaced, and so this just gives us the money to go
Okay.
do it.
But is this done with your own staff or with contracted services?
It's contracted.
Your own staff?
No. I mean, it's not just the staff capability, it's the equipment that's associated with it, and we don't have the equipment to do the excavation that's necessary.
Contracted, how is it contracted? In other words, is it per valve or per time and materials, or?
It's time and materials, but we have a standing service agreement that we have a standing contract. So if we had the money today, we could go, we know the price and we could go do it, once they're available essentially to do the work.
Or unclear. So is it per valve, or what's the contract price you have is for what?
So we have a price list that tells, the contract actually serves multiple purposes. One is the emergency contract. So if we had something tonight, we could call them and they could come in and do work. And so it gives us a price for truck per hour and person per hour and certain other equipment. And so depending on the job, you package the job with that price list, and then you have your price. But some valves might require a day to replace, and some might be multiple valves in a specific location that could take 2 or 3 days. And so, that's how it works.
Basically, time and materials based on agreed upon amount.
Yes.
Then who do we have more than one provider for that, or is it?
We have just one. Yeah.
Who is it?
The contractor, RH White.
Okay. And is that a multiple year agreement, or how's that?
Yes.
Okay. How
Up to
often?
3 years, if we choose to renew it. Last year was the first year.
And for my information, a valve is something that comes out of the water treatment, or is it a valve in the street, or is it?
It's in the street, so if you drive down the street, you see the big covers, which are either sewer or drainage manholes. Then you see little ones, they're about 6 inches. You may not see those because you're driving past them too fast, but they're
Little
little,
square ones.
little round circles.
squares,
They say
yeah,
water on them,
okay.
you pop them off, you
Oh,
stick a
okay.
wrench way down, and it turns a valve, and that valve controls the water that's going through the pipe, and so you can shut it off to a certain
There's a
speed.
leak or something. Yep.
So when they replace these, it's often excavation.
So
and-
you, cut out a big box, dig it all the way down, pull the whole thing out, put a whole new one in, connect it all back together.
Cut off the ones on either end
Yep.
first.
Yes.
Excellent.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Any other questions?
So this is probably a stupid question, but so it does say that the report recommended downsizing and replacing meters greater than 1.5 inches. Is that because of the condition of them, or is there a reason we're changing them for a different size, right? Is it a different equipment, or is it just they need maintenance, I guess, that they need replaced?
It's both. So the meters do have a life expectancy and they need to be replaced, but in some cases, and these are particularly, we're talking about, in most cases, commercial meters. If the business has changed over multiple times, we may have a business that was in there a long time ago that used a lot of water, and so that meter was appropriate, and now we have a business in there that's not using as much water. And so if the meter is one, old, and two, there's not a lot of water going through it, then you might not be registering the right amount on your meter, which means we're losing money because we're not getting paid for the actual water that's going through the meter. So we want to get the right size meter in the building so that we're actually collecting the revenue we should be from the customer.
So I assume then the two things we're really looking for here is maintenance, right? Making sure that we're replacing them before we have an issue, and also then ensuring that we're capturing appropriate revenue. I mean, I assume it's twofold for all.
Yep.
Anybody else? Questions? If not, motion time. Oh, you can do the motion. then.
McMahon? I make a motion to recommend the town vote to transfer $275,000 from water retained earning for the design, repair, or replacement of various water infrastructure.
Bradley, second.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions, or considerations? If not, let's vote.
Ahuja, yes.
Blumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Brandt, yes.
Clap, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Stafford, yes.
Is 900. Okay, next up are so-called sewer system improvements. The other end of the pipe. And that is $150,000 from
Sewer
I assume
retained
that's
earnings.
sewer retained earnings.
is.
Are there any questions on that? My notes say pumps, impellers, and controls.
I have a hard time arguing with any sewer improvements. I feel like we probably want that to continue to work correctly.
Yep.
I guess it's maybe appropriate time to ask. One of the questions that we've been trying to grasp with as a board, and having heard from the Affordable Housing Trust, et cetera, is where we're at with the so-called, sewer moratorium and that. Is there any newer insight that you have from the last time? I'm sure we asked this last time too, or nothing.
Not much that I'm going to be able to tell you, other than the fact that it's now with, the information is now with the consultant, and our target is that by the first half of this year, we have a product that we're circulating to committees and town staff to see what the results are, and we can start discussing how we want to interpret that data or use that data. So
there is progress being made, and
Yeah.
it sounds like we're moving
yeah, I think
forward.
I've said this before, but the bulk of so up to this point, in order to get a accurate depiction of, what's going into the sewer system, not just physically, but also what we've committed to on paper through permits. We had to go through every single commercial property in the town and go back to the history as many decades back as we could go and look at every permit and every document and do that for each individual site. So that was done by the town engineer, and then she's now recently, in the last month, provided that information to the consultant that can take that now and digest it and turn it into the product that we're ultimately looking for. So that's where we are.
Good news. Any other questions on this? Way. Is 11J.
McMahon. I make a motion to recommend the town vote to transfer $150,000 from sewer retained earnings to replace various sewer infrastructure.
Bradley, second.
Any further conversation, questions, discussion? If not,
I just had
oh,
one.
go ahead.
Do we have, I guess this would apply to water too. Are there former articles that have not been closed out from previous years that still have money left for these type of things, or is this the first year that?
We have previous articles that are not closed out.
How much is left in those articles? Or is there a lot left or a little bit left? Or
I
how to quantify?
I don't know how to,
That's a lot.
I mean, it's all in the reports, so it's not unknown, but I don't know any specific number off the top of my head.
We unfortunately, because of all the transition in the finance department, we aren't getting our monthly reports on all those old articles like we used to. So our last update was the end of this year. So I do have, from December.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that
Go back and
bad.
look. No, so if we can get it once a quarter at least,
Yeah,
we can keep up with it. But you could look through that, I guess, and see. Okay, Prashant?
Ahuja, yes.
Blumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Brandt, yes.
Clap, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Shafford, yes.
900 in favor. Okay, we next come to sewer system design. 11K, I don't know why I called it design, but it says, it's called town sewer system in the warrant. And that is a $300,000 sewer retained article. And I have notes that say pump station design. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, you want to tell us just a tad more than that?
Yep, so the previous article was to replace individual pumps and things like Walter mentioned. So that's kind of our baseline, like routine thing. Then we have these stations that some of them, we can't do the rehab ourselves. So we call the replacing pumps and things like kind of our mini rehab. So we do that internally, we buy the equipment, and then we do it ourselves, basically. In some cases, these pump stations are old, and there's lots of things that need to be replaced with them, so we need to rehab the whole structure. So we did an assessment of the next 3 in line that we want to do. That assessment gave us basically the scope of work. This money funds the design work associated with rehabbing those pump stations. And then the next step would be we'd come back with a request for the money to actually do the work.
Okay, and that's expected like next year, a year, or is it? Other thing?
Ideally a year from now, but can't say for sure.
My only question is this with our existing contract with Tom? Or somebody else? or-
This is somebody else.
Okay. So we went out and solicited several proposals and selected somebody else?
Yeah, it's sometime in the past. I mean, we don't do that every single time. We have a, because there's a benefit to having someone who knows your systems and don't have to kind of re-educate someone every time. So we did do that at the outset, but we've been working with this consultant for the past couple of years that's doing this work.
Which one's this one?
This is
Woodard and Curran?
Wood and Curran, yeah.
Okay.
And any ballpark on how much it costs? I mean, on a lot of these buildings, it's, 10 times the design amount or something is the cost of the building. Is this similar, or is it? You don't know.
I think a ballpark is in the $1 million range
Okay.
for one.
So the design is for 3 of them, is that right?
Yeah.
3 of them, okay.
Is there any logic to doing one design at a time?
What do you mean?
Doing one pump station at a time?
$100,000 to look at design one rather than
Yeah.
3 in a year? Or are we getting economies of scale and doing all 3 at once?
Yeah, so, I mean, all those are good reasons. So it's, it goes back to the vehicle life cycle. So we have 30 stations. If we just did one a year, that's 30 years. We're not doing one a year. We're doing one every 4 or 5 years. So that's 30. So like at some point we're not doing it fast enough to make it make sense for us to stay on any sort of track that's going to allow us to keep these things updated. So to me, it makes more sense to get all the money, and if we can get them on, them being the designer, to do this work efficiently, they know they've got 3 they need to produce for us, it's easier for us to map it out and schedule it and get it done quickly versus once a year asking for more money. Because if we did one and they finished the design this summer, then we got to sit and wait until next year to come back and ask for more money. And to me, it just makes more sense to have the money, be able to do it as quickly as we can, and keep the ball rolling.
With regards to a lot of the things we've talked about here, there's a clear and obvious risk element to not doing the work. This is buildings that are structurally standing and clearly in need of being replaced at some point. How would you describe the risk of putting this off a year?
Well, the cost of an emergency response is substantially higher than anything we schedule. So I don't know necessarily how to quantify it, but I just, every time we delay by a year, 6 months, whatever the case may be, then that's just kicking everything else further down the road. So I suppose we could, I know you're not suggesting this, but we could always say we're not going to do it. But then when something happens, the people that are affected by that aren't, like they don't want to hear that we just decided not to do it.
Sure. I think you framed the car, though, as the car is not working. Clearly, like, we need something. And the other equipment, this is older equipment at risk. It's 20-plus years.
Yeah.
I guess the level of criticality that these projects have reached for getting done. Clearly, they've risen to the list of all the things you've weeded out. So I know there's a lot of things you didn't bring to Capcom or that you're defraying. I still haven't heard that you believe these are really critical.
Well, I would describe it as they're beyond their life cycle.
Yeah.
And so every day past the life cycle, you're just hoping it's not going to break. And are we maintaining it? Of course we are. But we're putting money into it that potentially we could be putting somewhere else if we had something that was modernized or more functional or more efficient, that wasn't built in 1970 but was built in the 2000s, and all the benefits you get, just like these vehicles. I mean, you're not just getting a new vehicle that looks nice, you're getting better fuel mileage, you're getting like all the benefits you get from 30 years of technology improvements between, when it was last built and now. And so if it was built in 1970, which these were, they're 50 years old. And so they are at the end of their life cycle. And so we should be fixing them. And could they go another 10 years? Maybe. But but if we wait 10 years, we still have 30 to fix. And so we've lost 10 years of getting something done. So.
And this is the structure, the envelope, or is this the actual equipment inside it as well?
No, I showed a picture of a building at the summit, but they're not all buildings. And it's not necessarily, like, we're not tearing down the building and putting up a new building. It's everything that's inside. And in some cases, there's no building. It's just outside, or it's underground.
Okay.
And so what we're talking about replacing is the guts, all the pumps and the piping and everything that the wastewater is flowing through and into and out of. That's what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. I was under the impression there was some of the building elements of this as well, but.
So on a building like one I showed, we might maybe put a new roof on it or something, but the focus is on the inside, not the structure itself.
Okay, thank you.
So you said we have 30 pumps. If we say a 20 to 30-year useful life, right, if we said we have a 30-year useful life, and we're doing 3 now, is it reasonable to expect 3 years from now we'll have prioritized the next 3 and we're just sort of in a constant cycle of repairing and replacing? I mean, is that, not that you have a crystal ball, right? So is that a reasonable sort of?
Sort of, what we've tried to do is, so you've got when we're talking wastewater, you've got the station, which is pumping it, moving it around, and then you have the things in between, which is the pipes. And there's obviously a cost to replace any of that stuff, so we can't do it all at the same time, but there's also a cost in terms of capacity, because we have to be able to manage these projects, and the same people are doing the water and the sewer. Tried to do is basically alternate, so we focus on pipes, replace a section of pipe somewhere, and then jump to a station, and then jump to a pipe, and kind of, so we're doing both parts of the system. It doesn't exactly work that way, but that's kind of the idea, so that we're touching the whole system, and we've got a deliberate approach to, going after everything and not just fixing one thing, but, the link between the stations, if it's broken, doesn't matter how good the stations are if there's nothing can flow in between. So, does that kind of answer?
Excellent. Anybody else? How about a motion?
I move to recommend the town vote to transfer $300,000 from sewer retained earnings for the purpose of designing to support the renovations of sewer pump stations.
Bradley, second.
Any further discussions, comments? Prashant?
Ahuja, yes.
Blumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Brandt, yes.
Clap, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Stafford, yes.
900. Okay, thank you. Let's keep moving to the big dog right now is Article 12D. Into a borrow opposed to a fund, and that is town water supply improvements, $2.5 million borrow. Any specific questions on this one?
So originally, there was a design article, is that? We've already approved the design
Yes.
money. And that was a different article?
Yes.
Now it's, and what's the timing in terms of when you plan to bid this?
The goal is towards the later half of this year.
So is this something that you could get the bids and come to the fall town meeting with?
That's always a possibility. It's not what I would recommend or like to do, but yeah, I don't know if it would work for the timing of fall town meeting, but that's that is an approach that's possible, yes.
Any other questions?
Just a reminder, I think that even though this is a borrow, the payments are eventually going to come out of which? Is it the water retained earning and sewer retained earning, or?
Water.
It is water, so this is, yeah.
Okay, and this is mainly largely piping?
It is all pipes.
Pipes,
Yeah.
okay.
It's just another, I mean,
Yeah,
another example. We have about 100 miles of water pipe. In 4 years, we've done 1 mile. So that's 400 years to do all the pipe, which,
How much does this do?
this does about 1 mile. So, so we probably need to
$2 a
ramp it
mile.
up more than ramp it down. If we think we need to replace our pipe, if a pipe can't last 400 years, which I don't think it can, I mean,
not gonna last 400 years.
so, I mean, I don't say that like to alarm people, we're not gonna fall apart, but I do say it because like it puts things in perspective, I hope, that if we don't keep on it and keep going, then you just get behind and you don't really have a chance to catch up.
So this is $2.5 million per mile for this pipe. What you're talking about for 100 miles of pipe, it's not democratic. It's not $2.5 million for every mile, is it?
No, it depends on the size of the pipe.
Exactly,
The location of the pipe, what we're
Okay.
doing with the pipe. Yeah.
We use the analogy for 400 years. I think that the analogy for costs is equally not not relevant because this is not a typical mile of pipe. This is a very expensive mile of pipe.
Is that accurate? Is this an expensive mile of pipe?
So the number we have is a generous estimate because the design's not done. And, we don't want to have to come back and ask for more money. So, ideally, it's not going to cost us $2.5 million, but I can't guarantee that. I mean, I'll probably be back here telling you, like, whatever, just because I said that. But for our previous project,
The Fall Town meeting.
we were, $500,000 under what we asked for, so our previous mile of pipe. So,
So if you have extra money, will you do extra pipe or does the money come back?
You never borrow it, I think is.
Well, I wasn't sure if like there was a plan for like, okay, to go an extra half mile because we can. Because obviously, eventually we need to cover this 100 miles
we
of
will if
pipe.
we can. We will if we can. But when we do the projects, like when the bid comes back, and let's say it comes back at $2 million, we're not borrowing 2.5, we're borrowing 2. And then if we decide
Okay.
that it makes sense to do something more, then we would pursue the $500,000 or whatever the remaining balance is.
It's not perfectly synonymous. Just because you've done the mile and you have $500,000 left, you can't just build some extra pipe because that all comes out as a result of design, planning, materials, all kinds of other things. So
Yes.
I think getting to the question about, like, just keep building pipe, what the hell? It's not quite like that.
But I mean, it's a good point. Like, if there's way to contract things, there's way to design things so that you build those, like, we're trying to build that into
Potential.
build that flexibility into our projects so that, I know you guys want to get out of here, but I'll give you an example. The interceptor, so we've talked, the interceptor line is our sewer line. We did a big effort over the last several years to line this main line that goes to the treatment plant that carries all of our wastewater. So we built that contract so that we could do additional lining, like the contract was built so that we could do a whole bunch of extra work if there was funding available in the, at the end of the project. And prior to that, we built a contract that allowed us to do extra design or camera, in that case, camera work or whatever. So that worked out that we were able to do our interceptor project, and we're doing a substantial amount more, and we're doing it all under the amount of money that was originally appropriated for one project. We're getting lots of other stuff done. So I don't know in this particular case because of some design questions, but the idea is that we're building that model into all of our work so that we can, if we can get 2 miles done, when we thought we were gonna get a mile, that's what we're trying to do, so.
Is there an opportunity to line a water pipe?
The what?
Line a water pipe?
Yes, that's what this project is.
Oh, that's what this is.
Yep.
Anybody else?
Is there a limit to the number of times you can line a pipe? Because I would assume you start to lose volume inside the pipe and add pressure.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate statement. I don't know specifically. I'm sure it depends on the type of pipe and size and everything else, but yes, generally you're gonna lose diameter of your pipe, and so you probably reach a point where you can't do it anymore.
Okay.
McMahon, I move to recommend the town borrow $2,500,000 for the purpose of lining the water line on Route 9.
Bradley, second.
Any further discussion?
My only question, which I was getting at, is, should we be treating the DPW projects the way we do the other, the school and the library and other, which is to go out and get the bids, and then, I realize there's a timing issue with that as well.
Oh, you mean like school roofs and other things?
I mean, it
No, there's an
certainly would.
advantage to doing
Maybe
it.
Chris has got it right and everybody else has got it
Yeah,
right.
it is an advantage to doing that in that you are more sure of the number, I think. But it's a disadvantage to the timing. You can only come back at town meetings, and then there's a delay from town meeting to when, you get the money and things like that.
The flip side, there's the risk that it comes in at $2.6 million, and
There's
we,
less risk that that would have, yeah, right,
but
okay. I honestly think like the schools and have decided to do that more on their own from bad experiences, so I guess it depends how many good or bad experiences DPW has with this method. Right, if you're constantly going, God, we got 2.5 million, but now we need 2.7, then yeah, I think you might start getting pushed towards getting bids in hand before, do a design. A design phase that includes bids, I guess, is the difference, not the just basic design. If no further comments, let's vote.
Ahuja, yes.
Lundberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Brandt, no.
Clap, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Shafford, no.
Okay, so I have 7-2-0, correct?
Yep.
With Brandt and Shafford is in. Any specific reason from you guys?
I'd rather have the bids in hand.
Same.
Chris, is there an operational reason why, because the schools do this and some of the other capital projects do this, is there a timing reason why it's harder to do with DPW or the way you do your contracts, or just a preference for the way you execute?
Yeah, I think timing is a key part of it. It's timing for funding, but also timing for construction. So there's a season for doing the work, and I'm not talking specifically about this water project, I'm just talking in general. And so when you're tied to two opportunities in a year to get funding, I guess I don't see the drawback to, I don't see the drawback to approving it now. Because if we get a bid and it's under 2.5, then we wouldn't borrow that much we would only borrow what the bid says. And if it's over 2.5, then in my opinion, then if that's a concern if there's a concern that we're going to be short money, then we should just raise the borrow limit so we can have what we think we need if there's a concern for that. I don't think waiting does it. We're still spending the money regardless. So all waiting does is just puts us potentially at risk in terms of timing, because we might have to sit and wait 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, till the next town meeting, or there might be a construction-related issue that means we have to wait till the following year to start. So I guess I don't see the risk of approving it because yeah, I don't see the drawback of approving it. So
Thank you.
Okay. We will now move on to Article 17, which we also talked about at the Budget Summit. There is one change since the Budget Summit. It's still $92,500, but now it's getting funded through the Storm Water Utility Enterprise Fund instead of free cash, which I think it started off as way back when, which makes sense because this is a perfect example of stormwater, I think, if I remember. This is your water going into the swamp area, right? Yep. Okay. Are there any more questions on Article 17? Hear any, so why don't we do a motion and then people
McMahon.
can wake up.
I move to recommend the town raise and appropriate from Stormwater Utility Enterprise Fund $92,500 for the purpose of repairing the swale leading to Cedar Swamp.
You just wanted to say swell, but that was
That is
cool.
right.
Bradley, second.
Any other discussion on this one? Comments, considerations? Okay, if not, then Prashant, let's vote.
So I.
Ahuja, yes.
Sorry. Hold on one sec.
So I'm curious, I mean, obviously, we're all looking at areas where we can reduce spending this year, right? Like, I think you've heard that over and over again. And this is the one I was curious, again, it's not a huge dollar amount, but is this something that could be put off another year, right? It seems maintenance more than anything. It doesn't seem to have a huge impact if it's not done. I mean, it obviously is going to have an impact or we wouldn't do it, but is this one that realistically we could put off a year?
I would recommend it because it's the location, you may not remember, I don't know who recalls the map, but this is at the East Main Street Railroad Bridge.
Right.
And so it's a contributing factor to water under that bridge that prevents people from using the road to go under the bridge. In particular, again, I'm not trying to be dramatic, I'm just saying, police and fire, that's their access to get to one side of the town or the other. And if the road's flooded, then they're not going that way. And so I think, you know, I'm not guaranteeing that it's never going to flood. I'm just saying this is part of a potential solution to mitigate flooding, and so we should do it.
But wasn't this also part of another project that had some benefit to do, being done at the same time within the swamp itself?
Yes, so originally it was listed as free cash, and that's because we were going to try and take advantage of some money we have from the state for related things in the Cedar Swamp, but I don't see the, so this project has to be permitted before we would do it, and that's a whole process by itself, and we didn't, after time has gone by now since January, and I don't think the timing's going to work that we're going to be able to get it done. I hope we do, but I don't know that it's going to be permitted before July 1st, and after July 1st, we can use stormwater money. So, so it just made sense to us to take it where it should come from, out of the stormwater fund. So we don't have the stormwater fund until July. So we thought we were going to get it done before July. Potentially, we could use some of the money that we have from the state in the earmark to make that 92.5. Maybe it becomes, 80 or 75 or something because we use money from another pot. But I don't think it's all going to line up, so we can do that. So we just said, let's just pull it from stormwater and, cover it that way. So, yes, long answer, yes, there was a connection, but the connection is sort of separating now from a funding perspective.
Work because of the connection.
So for the two of you who are thinking delaying this, and from my perspective, the stormwater, what are we calling that, enterprise fund? Stormwater utility enterprise fund. The revenue for 25 is going to be the revenue for 25, and the rates for 25 are going to be the rates for 25. Now it's just a question of, okay, with that money, what's the priority for stormwater for 25? So if this is one of the priorities, we should do it now. Pushing it off a year doesn't change what anybody owes on the stormwater.
The only argument I would
Is it a
have is
fee?
if we didn't do it, then there's $92,000 in there and maybe there's a bigger priority next year, right? And I'm not necessarily arguing we
Yeah,
shouldn't do
no,
this
no,
one,
but I'm
it was just that
assuming
it's worth
this
having
is
the
a priority
conversation
for
and
Chris.
asking
That's
the
what I'm saying,
question.
like,
Yeah.
delaying it a year doesn't change this year's taxes, it doesn't change this year's fee, it doesn't change this year's anything. So really, what you're saying is this really your priority?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's the good point, right? So if we didn't do it this year, I assume it's still the priority next year, and so it has no impact, right? We just incur the cost a year later.
It just costs more next year. Probably.
Well, that's possible too, yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Any further comments? Otherwise, let's vote. Hearing none. Prashant?
Ahuja, yes.
Lumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Brant, yes.
Clap, yes.
Dolan, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes?
Stafford, yes.
900. Okay, I think that's it for DPW articles. I just wanted to check with Andrew. You had
Yeah.
some questions, and I guess, Jane, this is a conversation you can't participate in. But Andrew had some question on something to do with salary and wages in the DPW budget, I think.
Sure. So I tried to look at all the departments and sort of see the kind of percentage of increases that was happening within the individual budget lines. And I noticed DPW, number one, has a ton of different areas where it has salary, wages attached to different groups. But you had some groups that had salary, not including the ones that were impacted by things like the community center and stuff like that. Ones that I was hoping to try and understand better. For example, the water operations wages were a raise of about 14%. DPW sewer operations wages were about 11%. Sewer clerical were about 9.5%. And it goes all the way down to places where you have like 2 or 3%. So I would love to understand across all of those individual groups. I realize they're probably driven by contracts and stuff like that, but why is it some of them are growing up so much more substantially than others?
So the big reason is driven by contracts, but the two you mentioned, water and sewer, we requested an additional additional staffing in the water. So part of that is, I think it's a 90-10, or I forget the split, but our water and sewer, since those operators do cross-functional stuff, so they often do both. So, so we're adding staff, and that staff obviously impacts the water, and it also has an impact on sewer.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought I had accounted for that for some of the other groups, but you're saying that the ones I'm talking about there were ones that were accounted for in the...
I mean, when you say, I'm not sure exactly if you're referring to something specific other than just the budget and the wages and salaries, or, salaries and wages line.
So I tried to account for it with the notes that Christie had in the budget book about why things were going up. It sounds like I missed...
We added a storm engineer
Yep.
and a maintenance craftsman underwater sewer.
And are those lines that would appear under the water operations wages and the sewer operations wages?
Yeah, but they're shown, if you're looking at the budget, it would be shown under the program improvement request column. I don't know if you're...
Well, yeah, but I'm just thinking what the net amount was and the year-over-year change. So I guess those are the program improvements. So I apologize then. There's two other areas I had questions about. Under the stormwater, I can see that there's a line for a person, the new person. But there's also a $20,000 amount for overtime highway in the stormwater side. Given that this hasn't even really started, how do you go about allocating 20% of that group, about 20% of the cost as overtime for something that hasn't happened yet?
So that's money that was pulled, that's money that's already funded through the general budget, and we moved it from the general. So we reduced the general budget and put it in the stormwater budget.
I guess this is the expectation.
So it's not an ad, and
Understanding that it nets out to nothing, but how is it you're anticipating already 20% over some wage? It's not the individual, it's not the person who's the stormwater manager, the 5102 account line. It's like 20,000 additional over that. Is that expected overtime?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's 5105I, I think.
Yep.
Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about?
Right.
Yes, so that's overtime. That's overtime we already we're funding it right now.
Yeah.
But we're just paying for it out of the general budget. And so this is proposing to pay that overtime, which we attribute to stormwater-related activities, to pay for it out of the stormwater enterprise fund.
Okay. So I guess
So the general budget went down by $20,000.
Right, but the term highway, I guess I wasn't connecting, but you're saying that's
okay.
just where the,
Yeah, that's
the
that's
budget
the
line that
label
this
for
ties, okay.
where that is, yes.
And the last question I had was with regards to DPW water contractual, went up about 13.5%, reflecting about almost $200,000. So could you explain what the DPW water contractual line represents?
Yep, so it's a whole bunch of different contracts, standing contracts we have. But the major one is our water treatment plant, which is the bulk of that. I can look it up, but the $1 million or whatever it is a year for the contracted services. But that contract includes a price index increase, and we've come up short in the past, and so we think we did a 11% inflation adjustment for this coming year, and so that's what it is. It's an adjustment for the CPI.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, could I just follow up on one of?
Sure.
So, and maybe I don't have the latest, but, and not to go down a rat hole, but maybe it's explainable. So the 5015I overtime highway actually, according to my book, went up $2,000 this year in the general budget. So does that mean it still gets accounted for here, but then it gets paid for out of sewer, or would it be in both?
Probably went up less than it would have because of other reasons,
Yep, so
because of
we
salary
take
increases
out
or whatever.
a number, and then you have to adjust the remaining number. That number changes because everybody's pay goes up as part of, any sort of annual adjustment to pay. And so those adjustments, because it's all, we factor it based on the highest paid salary, and so it's based on salary, that number. So that 2,000 additional you're saying 2,000 additional in the general budget, right?
For overtime highway?
Yes, so that additional is attributed to adjustments in, accounting for the
Yeah,
pay
no,
adjustments.
that makes sense. But I thought it would go down by 20,000 based on the fact that there's now 20,000 in the stormwater one.
Probably went down 20,000 and then up. It had to
Went
go
up
more than
22 and then went
22 or
down
something,
20.
yes.
That would be a
Or
big
the
increase.
math was not done right or something.
Yeah, I mean, I can look at it, I don't know, I'd have to look the numbers, but
But theoretically, that's what would happen. It could be $20,000 less than,
There were no salary increases or people increases in the other group, then you would expect it to have gone down by 20,000, but if, depending where the people expenses show up or how they do that. But anyway, it's something you could dive into.
I can give you a breakdown, I can't do it right now. But
yeah,
I
no, that's fine. I guess the other question I have, and, we talked about the budget challenges this year, and, one of the thoughts I've had, and I actually thought the school board did a pretty good job of it, they level funded most of their expenses from last year. And I wondered, what would the impact to DPW be if we asked you to level fund your expenses to be the same as last year?
So we do level fund, but outside of, so if our contracts go up, if we want to keep the contract, we have to adjust to the cost of the new contract. And so that's,
So I'm just talking expenses, not salary, just to.
that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about contracts
are
we
all
have
expenses.
Oh, okay.
versus,
Okay.
and it's the same thing for, so fuel, we could level fund fuel, but we're probably just going to be back to you asking for money if we want, and it's not just fuel for us, we pay for fuel for everybody, so that's police and fire. So we do level fund, except for where we know we have if the contract is going up in cost, we have to account for that cost.
I mean, but everything went up, so everything,
What do you mean everything went up?
I would suspect if I went through every one of the line items on expenses went up.
No, they didn't. I mean, you can go, no, they didn't.
All right.
Chris, just one more thing I wanted to mention to you, because we didn't vote tonight, but we already voted to accept Ed Waters Way at a previous meeting, 800, and it was, I think that's also a DPW article, so. But that's why we're not taking that. I certainly want to thank you for your time, and I, for one, very much appreciate your organized and planning style.
I think
You
Ahuja
run the
has a question.
department. Yeah, you have another question?
I think Ahuja has a question. Sorry, just.
Prashant, go ahead.
Sorry.
Excuse me, Prashant.
Yep. So thank you, Andrew. So from the budget table, I just had one question. It mentions about keeping the craftsman 2 as the same staffing, but increasing one craftsman 1. So I'm just curious, what is the difference between craftsman 1 and craftsman 2 in that budget table?
We have basically a rank structure, so grades. So one's a higher grade than the other. Is that what you're asking, or?
Yeah, what is the difference in the two? Is that the grade difference between the two? One is higher, one is lower, or is there
Yes.
any roles and responsibility difference as well?
Yes, so one is higher than the other, and it's based on responsibilities associated with the position.
Okay. Okay. And the other question I had was, so for the reason for additional staffing on the water division, it's mentioned that this will enable the preventive maintenance and ability to support more daily water customer requests. Do we have some understanding, like exactly how many customer requests we have? Again, some of the performance measures, right? Like how this adding another staff on the water division will help in in handling more customer requests. Like how many are we getting now versus getting one more will help better respond to those requests.
I don't have those numbers with me, but yeah, we track all of the requests for service from customers, and we could give you that number.
Yeah, that would be helpful. The reason is because, it just helps with those performance matrices to know and better appreciate exactly how, what sort of volume are we talking about and how that can be handled with more staff.
Yep, so, but just, I do want to make a point that, so if you look at the police and fire, one of their metrics is how many calls they get, and they come in and they say we get more calls, right? They can't control that. So our metric is not, we don't measure, we keep track of how many requests we get, but our goal is that number is going down because we should be anticipating a lot of that work and not having someone else tell us we need to be doing it. So, so we track the number, but I don't use that number to say, give me more people, because like, to me, that's not a real representation of, like, we want the number to go down. So it's kind of it's not an argument that makes sense for me to say to you, because I want the number to go down. So
Makes sense.
I know that that's not specific to what
Sure.
he was just talking about, but that's just in general. We want our number to go down. You know, police and fire can't control their numbers. They just react. But we have some control over ours, so we shouldn't be cheering ourselves that we had 1,000 calls this year. Like, we should be, not happy about that, so.
Correct. But it just helps, like if you need more staffing, then yes, it helps that,
Yep.
You need more
Yeah.
staffing because you have so many of those requests coming in.
Yeah, points well taken.
I have one question, because I think there's actually planning, but do you know this sidewalk easement article that's new? It sounds like it's coming from planning, not you, but,
The new one,
Yeah.
like one that's going to be added? Yes, it's for the Otis Street corridor project. So it's the easements associated with that project on Otis Street.
thanks. Well, thank you
Just
very.
one final
wait,
comment, just
one
for the
more.
record, because Chris is correct, his budget actually went down this year for expenses if you didn't count the community center, so.
Yeah, we went
There were
down by
a lot
2% if you take off the
Community center, which adds,
center. Yeah.
because, yeah, but
So
custodian.
thank
or
you for
something.
that.
Yep.
And thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you coming back, and it was very informative. And
Yep.
helped us get through a whole
Yeah,
bunch
thank
of
you.
votes.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just wanted to catch up with everybody. We will meet Thursday here again. We have a kind of busy night. We have Sustainable Westborough coming in on their article. Town Manager Christy Williams will be here, talk to us. And then John requested some time to give us a brief update and prep of annual town meeting, so we can know what's going on there. Tomorrow night at the select board meeting, the warrant will close. And so we'll actually know for sure what we're dealing with. Right now, there are no more petition articles as of this afternoon anyway. So hopefully that stays. And to that end, on Monday night, the 4th, we'll be meeting with the select board back across the street on those citizen petitions. And that's pretty much all we'll do for that evening. We have the schools coming on that Thursday. We can learn about their projects. And right now, we have the planning board coming on the following Monday, and at that point, we'll vote out whatever we can on the 11th and 14th and get ready for the R&R. I started the process of creating our list of recommendations document for all the votes. I've at least gotten in the titles of them all, and I've put in the votes we had so far, and starting to add our what we called committee comments. So I'm expecting probably by next week at least, I'll start circulating that so we can get feedback on the committee comments. There's no reason we can't do that ahead of time versus the end, because we usually have the message that we have to deal with at the very end. And in fact, I guess all the voting and comments should add towards the message anyway, right? Makes sense. Okay. Does anybody have any liaison or other reports? Okay. If not, I have 2 sets of minutes to approve. February 12th, February 15th. Beth is here, so we can ask her. Which do you remember which minutes that was
I believe it's the 15th.
in? Okay, so the one, there was one item in the minutes where the minutes from what I saw, from what I went back and looked at, were accurate. Beth mentioned that the ambulance lasts 2.5 years, and it really, I mean, the ambulance lasts closer to 10 years, and if you have 4 of them, it's like 2.5 years.
Replacement cycle.
Yeah, replacement
One
cycle.
every 2.5
So the
years,
ambulance
yeah.
lasts a lot more than 2.5
Right,
years.
but the minutes currently read
Okay, sorry.
as though an ambulance only lasts 2.5 years.
So the question is, do we
Sorry
want to
about that.
add a post-meeting comment to say the life cycle is like 10 years, and
Yeah.
you would need
Yeah,
5
please.
every
Or
2.5?
alternatively, you could just
Or
take
just-
that line out of the minutes. It doesn't,
Yeah, well, it's up to, I guess,
Yeah.
you guys.
On the 15th, and the line reads, Ms. Blumberg noted that the life of an ambulance is only 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
given the
Which is
context
misleading.
of the paragraph, it would be easy to just remove that sentence and nothing would be lost. assuming
I'm
everybody
fine with
back
that.
agrees.
Is that okay?
Absolutely fine with that.
Okay. So that's, and excuse me, but that was on the 15th?
yeah.
Okay. I'll have her remove that line.
You're also on the first page on the 15th. The second to last paragraph, the last sentence of that paragraph says, Chair Leslie also reported that the free cash of $450,000 derived from the what started during COVID.
Derived from the what?
Yeah, that's what it says.
Derived from the what started during COVID?
Yeah,
Oh, derived from what started?
that is
No, it's the policy of using free cash to reduce the
Yes.
tax.
Tax.
It derived from when we started $1 million, and then she backed it down from all the savings we were making, and it ended up around 400,000, but
To say I was not at the meeting, so I don't know how it should read. I just was reading it and I was like, that
doesn't sound like something I might have said.
sounds like gibberish.
Yeah, no, that needs to be fixed.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll make up something good. Derived from,
Well, we could actually go look at the videotape.
Yeah, we
'cause I'm
could.
sure you didn't say that.
but I
will
might have
also-
actually said that or sounded
Well,
like
I
I said
actually am
that.
wondering if Laura had made that as a placeholder to go back and clarify, and she didn't, just based on the way it's
Right.
phrased. I have to tell you, I highlighted a handful of things because I read the minutes and was
Or-
confused.
See, what is another possibility is that, since I edit them before I send them to you, that's why it says draft 2, that I made it worse. Or I meant to go back and fix it, and I didn't. But we can fix something there that makes sense.
So on the last page, the one other thing, Mr. Bradley discussed Walkup Robinson being responsible for the purchase of free space. Oh, I think I just figured out what it's supposed to mean. Never mind.
Okay.
So that, I think, is fine. I think it means open space. It says free space, but that, I don't know, we might change it from free space to open space because I do think that is a
And
little
that's
unclear.
also on the 15th?
Yeah.
Okay,
Last page.
last page.
First paragraph, last page.
Okay, so 3 things: remove Beth's line, fix the derived from, and open
Change free
space.
to open space.
Okay,
yeah.
so, and are there any adjustments to the 12th? Okay, how about a motion to accept both minutes with the amendments to the 15th?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, so that was Bradley, motion and clap second for our illustrious minute taker.
Oh, do we need to do them separate so I can abstain though? Because I wasn't here for the 15th.
If you want to abstain.
You don't have
but
to
you
abstain.
obviously read
Okay.
them and you
I
heard them.
obviously read them. I'll go ahead and vote and not make it more
Because you
complicated.
weren't there. We could if you want, but if not.
No, it's fine.
Seems silly since you had more corrections than anyone else.
Is anybody else going to abstain, or is it okay to do both? Okay. Prashant?
Ahuja, yes.
Blumberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Brant, yes.
Clap yes.
Dolan, yes.
McMahon, yes.
Shafford, yes?
So both minutes passed 900 with amendment to February 15th. They're definitely getting more complex as our meetings have gotten more complex, so I think she's doing a great job keeping up with them. But I can understand how some of this gets away. Anybody have anything else, or?
I have one thing.
Yep.
So I corresponded briefly with John and Walter last night, and my question was if we wanted to use more free cash to lower the tax rate, how could that happen? And John referred me to the fiscal policy and also said there's a motion when the budget gets approved that free cash is part of that motion. So how as, I don't know if we as a board have any interest in endorsing that idea and what would it would take for it to happen at town meeting.
Well, I think it specifically the motion would be, because what he pointed to was the motion from last year, which said, and take $450,000 from free cash for the purpose of reducing taxes, to paraphrase. If the board wanted to do that, or if our committee wanted to do that, we could recommend that that would be the motion. I have great reservation in doing that, and we certainly can probably kick it around a little more next week, but I think right now we're taking close to $4 million in free cash use by paying for capital items and articles. Taking free cash purely to reduce the tax burden is likely to reflect poorly in terms of credit rating. because that's not something the credit rating people
That they approve.
particularly like seeing being done, and I think that could end up costing some amount of money in the fact that the borrows are bigger. And in general, you've kicked the can, well, there's two reasons. Since $8,000 is about $1 on the tax rate, if one went to the million, it's about $80 difference on the tax rate. It's a good number, but it's not, it doesn't get you from $1,000 down to, $250. It gets you from $1,000 to $920. And then I think you set yourself up for issues in the following year, because unless you're willing to make cuts of services on at least that scale, would have to fund that same amount of cash each year out of free
Yeah,
cash
I
to
mean,
avoid having just getting that $80 back on it.
I guess I'd like to put it on the agenda for next.
So I would like to see, so next meeting is when Christy is here, correct?
Yes.
Thursday? So I wonder if maybe John can come back. We had talked to him at the last meeting too, because what I had really asked for is, so what is that sort of excess free cash every year, right? What are we continually adding and sort of looking at some trend in year over year? And I think before I really have an opinion on whether we should be using free cash to lower the tax rate or not, I would like to see what that looks like on an annual basis, right? Is that really a sustainable strategy? Because I think Walter makes a really good point. So if we lowered our tax rate $500 by using free cash this year, well, we can't do it again next year.
It would take $4
And so we would
million
have a
of free
$1,500 jump in tax rate the following year, right? So that's not the option. So I would like to look at what is that sort of on an annual basis and what could we realistically, right? Are we already funding everything we can with the free cash articles we have? Or should we be doing more? I don't have any idea. I just want to look at the numbers. And so maybe we could ask John to present some of
Well,
that for us
we've
on
already
Thursday.
asked John for information, and he is planning on collecting at least what Rod asked, which was, I think, very specifically how much,
What's our general budget?
how much of the free cash was derived from lower expenses than budgeted versus higher revenue than budgeted. And I sort of asked for fiscal '23, how much did we basically, we started with this much free cash, we spent so much in fiscal '24 of it,
Right, that's sort of what I had
I
asked
think that's where
for,
you were
yeah.
heading to, so I did
So maybe
ask for
we could-
that, and I expect that we would have some of that information on Thursday.
Well, I'm just thinking maybe we put that conversation on the agenda with the expectation, right? And if John can't do it by Thursday, because I know John's sort of wearing multiple hats at this point too. but
Well, he
maybe we
said he
talk to him
couldn't
about
give me
availability.
the information tonight, but I think he can have some of that information for Thursday.
Yeah, so maybe we just plan on having that conversation Thursday, because I do think it's a conversation worth having, right? Whether it's
Oh, yeah.
sustainable or not, it certainly is worth talking through
Right.
it and really,
It's important to have
I'm a
that.
data person, right?
It's
So
important to
we're
have
looking
that
at
conversation, because it's also, even if you don't do it, important to explain why you wouldn't do
Right.
it.
Absolutely.
But it's also a fair question to ask, so and it's sort of our role to kick those things around, so and certainly one of the reasons for having the town manager come and the finance director is to be able to ask those kind of questions and kind of get it. And whether or not, we don't have to vote the budget Thursday, we can vote the budget in about 2 weeks or so, or a week and a half. But that gives time to either get more information or think about it or kick it around, so.
So I won't actually be here Thursday, so I won't be part of that discussion. But I did want to point out that, we do know we're not funding everything we could out of free cash. We just voted last week to do a borrow for the library. That could have been funded out of free cash. That would have not
Could
created.
it, what is the annual free cash we're generating?
Well,
That's my
that's a
question.
question. What I'm suggesting, though, is if we were to be more aggressive in spending down free cash, you know, I'm not at all in favor of creating these structural budget deficits and, you know, creating a, $1,500 tax increase next year when we have these capital borrows on the table instead of using that for free cash. I think we should be looking.
Well, and I think free cash for borrow makes sense, especially in
Way
the
more
avoidance
sense.
of interest expense in the
Way
future.
more sense, yes.
So it's not just the tax burden, but it's the interest expense in the future, right? So that is future costs.
Right, and it doesn't create the structural deficit.
Right. That was, I mean, and we sort of had that conversation a little bit, and I agree, right? And I think that's just really figuring out what is that number, right? What is the number we should be targeting on an annual basis? Ideally, for things that would otherwise be a borrow and carry an additional 5% cost over the next 30 years.
I guess my comment is just simply, if we tax the taxpayers for more money than we needed, why shouldn't we give it back to them?
The argument there would be we're avoiding taxing them even more in the future, right? Yes, we should not be taxing more than we need to. And I get your point, but it's going to be more expensive to give everybody back $80 this year and charge them $100 over the next 30 years because we're paying interest on it.
Maybe the revenue is even more next year.
But we still are borrowing the money and we're still paying interest on it regardless of what revenue is next year. Right, you're going to pay the interest. It's going to be $100 regardless.
Yeah, I agree with the interest thing. Although I wonder how much interest we get on free cash. Where's that
But we
money?
could ask.
Not
bet it's
making
not a lot.
interest, it's paying on the borrows, I think.
We are not getting 5% on it.
Okay, no, that's very good. And that was a primary reason for spending time with Christie next week. So I actually put on the agenda, I put the Sustainable Westborough thing first, thinking that might be a little more compact, 15-minute sort of thing or something, and that we'd want to spend an hour or more with the other, with Christie.
More likely to meander.
Yeah, that's a polite way to put it. But also, to that end, if you do a little bit of looking at the article, I did look at one of the articles, which I asked, I'm not going to vote tonight, but I think that one where the wetlands article was changing, I did go, and I was able to find that information online. And it looked to me actually like they'd done a pretty good job making it a much easier to read and understand bylaw, but largely still the same regulations, I think. So I think that's something we could vote at a future meeting without having them back. It was my general summary. If anybody doesn't feel that way, let me know. Okay, motion to adjourn, someone.
Shafford, motion to adjourn.
Clap second. Okay, Prashant, lead us home.
Ahuja, yes.
Lundberg, yes.
Bradley, yes.
Brant, yes.
Clap yes.
Dolan, yes.
Leslie, yes.
McMahon, yes?
Shafford, yes.
It's unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you, Westborough TV.